Donald Trump seems to have decided to very quickly shift the world's attention away from the failure in Iran, and the US appears to have begun preparations for a military operation against Cuba. Right now, there is heavy US air activity near the shores of Cuba amid Donald Trump's promises to deal with this island. Since the beginning of February, the US Navy and Air Force have conducted at least 25 reconnaissance missions near Cuba. Planes and drones operated in the area of Havana and Santiago de Cuba, sometimes coming to within about 65 kilometers of the island. And this is very important because exactly the same activity was observed before American operations against Venezuela and Iran. And this is a telling moment which indicates preparation specifically for a military operation. I'm Alexei Pecci. Let's discuss this together. But before we start, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, like this episode, and leave any comment under this video. This will really help promote the content on YouTube, and I will be grateful to you for that. In addition, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pecci News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, CNN reports today that an analysis of aviation data shows that the number of flights by American military intelligence services off the coast of Cuba has sharply increased. According to flight radar data, since February 4th, the US Navy and Air Force have carried out at least 25 such flights using both manned aircraft and drones. Most of these took place near Cuba's two largest cities, Havana and Santiago de Cuba, and some were within 65 kilometers of the coast. And what's notable is that these are only the ones that were publicly visible, and we'll get back to this because I think this is being done absolutely intentionally and deliberately so that everyone can see it. It is reported that most of the flights were carried out by P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft designed for surveillance and reconnaissance, and some by RC-135V Rivet joint aircraft, which specialize in electronic intelligence gathering. Several high-altitude reconnaissance drones MQ-4C Triton were also used. These flights are notable not only for their proximity to the coast, which allows for intelligence gathering, but also for the suddenness of their appearance. Before February, such publicly visible flights in this area were extremely rare. But it's also important to note when these flights began. In the weeks leading up to the military buildup around Cuba, Donald Trump's public statements against Cuba became noticeably harsher. The US president reposted on Truth Social a comment by Fox News host Mark Thiessen saying that Trump would visit a free Havana before leaving office as president. Just a few days after that post, Trump ordered an oil blockade of Cuba. Today, as we know, Trump is introducing an expanded sanctions regime against Cuba, insisting that Cuba poses a threat to US national security. Meanwhile, Cuban officials reject the suggestion that their communist government poses any danger to the US. They insist that they are open to negotiations, although they have vowed to wage a prolonged guerrilla war against American troops in the event of an attack. It's clear that the Americans insist that Russians and Chinese are operating in Cuba, definitely conducting surveillance on Americans, so this threat needs to be eliminated. But these events are notable because similar trends, when the Trump administration's rhetoric intensified and the number of publicly visible reconnaissance flights increased, were observed ahead of US military operations in Venezuela and Iran. In the case of Cuba, in Venezuela, Donald Trump announced the first American strike on a vessel carrying drugs in the Caribbean Sea on September 2, 2025, specifically pointing to its connection with the then president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, whom Trump accused of mass murder, drug trafficking, sexual exploitation, as well as acts of violence and terror. And just a week after this statement by Trump, public, highly visible reconnaissance flights began off the coast of Venezuela and continued right up to the days preceding the capture of Maduro by American special forces at his residence in Caracas. So, if we now see a certain pause in flights near Cuba, it could be a signal that the Americans are moving on to a specific military operation. A similar trend was observed in Iran, where there was a much larger group of aircraft. Similarly, intelligence-gathering drones were openly monitoring the southern coast of Iran ahead of joint strikes by the US and Israel. Among the aircraft actively involved in the Iranian conflict are the very same P-8A Poseidon RC-135V Rivet Joint and MQ-4C Triton, and it is exactly these same aircraft, absolutely these same planes and drones that are now monitoring Cuba. On the other hand, to approach this information as objectively as possible, it's worth remembering that since the beginning of 2025, dozens of similar American reconnaissance aircraft have been actively operating near Ukraine, monitoring the battlefield, as well as near geopolitical hotspots on the Korean Peninsula and along Russia's western border. The data shows that flights in these and other regions are carried out constantly. But this does not mean that these flights have led to any open American military operation. However, the observed increase in the number of flights off the coast of Cuba is still a new phenomenon and is different from the areas where these aircraft have historically been based. But it is important to note here that all the flights near Cuba that we mentioned today were tracked using publicly available flight tracking dashboards, using open source data, so this is as public as it gets. In some cases, this flight data was widely shared on social media, although if they really wanted to, these aircraft could easily hide their presence by turning off their transponders. That is, they can easily conduct surveillance and reconnaissance without being seen, but they choose to do it as visibly as possible. So the question here is, why is Donald Trump deliberately showing that he is monitoring Cuba? Maybe it's intimidation, or maybe it's a warning. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video or by scanning the QR code. It's on your screens. I would be grateful for any support. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.